Hello, Lauren. Thanks so much for hopping in on with me. I'm super excited to talk more about what you've been through and what you're doing now. Can we kind of start from where you started and tell just a little bit about yourself to start us off?
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for having me on the interview. It's really exciting to chat. So where did I start? Very good question. I guess throughout my 20s, I ran a business, I ran a PR and marketing business. So I started that at the age of about 21, kind of just went all guns blazing into that. I'm sort of one of those people that if I want to do something, I just make it happen, which has led to downfall at times. But yeah, generally, so I ran the PR marketing business throughout all of my 20s. It was specifically geared around equestrian businesses because I grew up riding horses. Horses were a huge part of my life. Really probably from about the age of 21, I started to suffer from anxiety and panic attacks. Probably when even maybe as young as about 18, I definitely had sort of more, had tendencies towards being a bit anxious. And I had the odd panic attack, but at the time I didn't really realise that they were panic attacks. I just thought they were kind of, little wobbly moments. But as I got sort of older through my 20s, the panic attacks started to become more often, and they were very, very much around food and around being out around in social situations and things like that. And I just used to feel so sick. I couldn't eat, and it just kind of got me into a pattern of having issues around food and choosing like safe options on menus, and it really restricted my my diet. And I live off things like toast and cereal and stuff that I deem to be safe. And I was also struggling quite a lot with IBS. I'd have really, really bad stomach problems. I'd swing from like being completely horribly constipated to really awful upset tummy. And it led to the point where I didn't want to book anything in the mornings because I was scared that I might get caught out or whatever. Mm-hmm. So any long journeys, anything like that used to bring up huge amounts of anxiety. So those two kind of went hand in hand. And when I was I'm trying to think back, I got married at 26 to an amazing guy who I'm still married to now. So 7 years on, still married, which is woo. Even when I look back at that time, it was I was not in a good place. I wasn't particularly happy. I wasn't living. I was just surviving. I was just kind of going from one thing to the next thing. Wasn't really sure where I was going, but I'd created this business, and I just threw everything into that, and that was my life. I didn't really socialize very much. I had the horses, so I was still very much involved in the horses. But that was it. I kind of went very insular. And about the age of 27, I started to, my panic attacks were horrendous. My anxiety was awful. I was spending time, I'd be ringing my husband, like virtually rocking on the floor, didn't know what to do with myself. I went to the doctors countless times. I was referred for stress management courses. I had CBT, but nothing really. They said they wanted to put me on certain drugs, but I couldn't believe that was the only option. And I just thought I just need to find a way of dealing with this myself. And I then started going to Pilates classes and doing a little bit more exercise. And I met he wasn't really termed a health coach, but I guess I'd call him a health coach now. And he just helped me look at my diet and just look at a few things to start making gentle tweaks to my lifestyle. And they had huge impact. And it was just things like balancing my blood sugar, reducing my intake of refined carbohydrates, steering clear from gluten, steering clear from too much dairy, and just starting to listen a little bit more, and always keeping like a handful of nuts in my handbag so I could keep that stable blood sugar. And little things like that started to make a difference. And I started to feel better in my stomach and my digestion, and I started to feel less anxious. So that sort of started me off on the journey of discovering a bit more of a holistic way of managing my anxiety and stress. But it was by no means the end of it, because that was probably, I don't know, about 5 years ago now. And since then, I've been on a bit of a roller coaster of self-discovery, shall we say. Mm-hmm. I have gone through phases of being completely obsessive about food to the point of orthorexic tendencies. I've been very extreme and very restrictive with foods. I still find it hard sometimes to not be restricted with certain food groups. I still struggle a little bit with carbohydrate fear, but it's getting, I'm a lot stronger with that than I am, and I'm a lot more balanced about that approach. I also got very, very obsessive about exercise, started strength training, and this is where, it was probably the hardest thing I've had to deal with, but probably the most amazing thing that's happened to me is I damaged a disc in my back about 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago. And at the point, I'd just discovered weight training, and I was loving it, and I was loving being able to use my body to be really strong, and I was like, yeah, I'm a badass, I'm like really powerful, like hashtag girl to lift or whatever. Yeah. But I couldn't train in the way that I wanted to, and I found it so hard to deal with. And it triggered off so many different things, like body image issues that I've always had but were coming back up, and things like going back to my restrictive eating, because I thought, well, if I can't exercise, then I need to be really careful about what I'm eating. And it sort of spiraled. Again, it took probably a good year for me to accept that injury before I even got to the bottom of what it was that was the causing the pain. But in the meantime, I decided to try yoga because I was like, well, I can't do anything. Well, I could do some strength stuff, but I couldn't do what I wanted to do. Yeah. So I sort of did a bit of that, but then I also really, really focused on the yoga. So I started with an aim of, let's see if I can help my back with this. I think I went to one session, and there was part of me that knew that this was going to play a huge part in my life, and there's part of me that knew that at some point I was going to become a teacher. I knew it wasn't then, and I'd been to one class, but there was just something in me, and I thought, this feels right. And even the yoga teacher said, oh, you're a natural, like you can just certain poses. I mean, I'm not by any means am I super, super bendy and flexible, but it just felt like I was supposed to be there. Yeah. So that was the start of my yoga journey, and that again kind of sorry, I'm rambling on here. No, story's quite long. That started my yoga journey off, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I found the things that probably the thing I benefited from the most was not the postures, not the movement, but actually the breath work, the pranayama, learning how to do things like the ujjayi breath, and learning how to belly breath, and just allow myself to deepen my breath, because I probably spent from when I was, 10 or 11 years old, breathing into my chest, so breathing really tightly, and to the point that the doctors actually diagnosed me with asthma and gave me an inhaler, rather than, I never had asthma or an inhaler. I just couldn't breathe properly because my diaphragm was like contracting, and I was just breathing into my chest, and I'd go dizzy, and that would trigger off my anxiety. So the breath work really, really hit me within a couple of sessions, and I was using it in my everyday life, which I just thought it's the simplest thing, but it made such a big difference. So that was probably the biggest thing I learned from that first sort of introduction to yoga. And then I trained to be a health coach in 2015 because I knew that I wanted to bring this holistic way of living to more people. And I thought it was all down to nutrition. At that point, I was very, not anti-spirituality, but I was very daunted by it. I was like, no, I'm not into any of that. You know, I just want to cook. I want to talk about food. I want to talk about the sciencey side. But again, I started to realize that you can be eating the most healthy diet in the world, but you can be completely miserable. And that's kind of where I was at. I was eating so well and so restrictively, healthily, but I was missing so much in life. So I quit my PR business in January this year, with the idea of going into full-time health coaching. And within a couple of months of doing, probably within weeks, within a month of looking at how I can promote my nutrition health coaching, again, I was like, no, this doesn't feel right. I was like, damn it, I thought I got it this time.
Thought you had it figured out. Yeah.
Can you not just let me do something and it feel right for a small amount of time?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, right, like, what on earth am I going to do? So I kind of reverted back to a little bit about the business coaching side of things, because I'd run a business. I knew how to work with people's communications. I know how to strategize, and I wanted to work with holistic entrepreneurs who needed that help in terms of pushing their business forward. And I did, so I was doing that a little bit, but in the meantime, I'd booked to go to Costa Rica to do a month intensive yoga teacher training. And I sort of just kept floating, like just keeping my head above water until that point. I was like paddling like crazy. I was still taking so much action all the time. I was relentless. I would not stop. I wouldn't rest. I would keep going, because I was like, this is how I'm going to make this work. This is how I'm going to make money. In actual fact, it was just leading to burning out, which I didn't realise until I came back from teacher training. But I went to Costa Rica in June for the whole month. Absolutely terrifying. I've never travelled really in my life, let alone travelled on my own. It was an incredible experience. Taught me a lot about myself. From a physical point of view, yes, it's tough and challenging, but I was quite fit and strong before I went, so that was nothing in compared to the kind of mental challenge of being in a country that you don't know, in an environment there was 12 of us, and then our teacher and our teaching assistants, being in a really, really close environment, not having your own space. It was intense.
For a month, too, right?
It triggered every issue I've ever had at some point through that month. It was like trigger. I was like, oh my God, like seriously. But I came back, and as a qualified yoga teacher, I went there thinking, oh, I'm doing this kind of for myself. I would like to teach, but I'm not sure I'm going to teach. And I came back and I was like, I have to teach. It just feels right. So I threw myself into that, and now so we're now in September, so it's nearly 3 months on, and I feel for the first time, having gone through a lot of shifts over the last few months, more so since I got back than actually during the process, and I am fully expecting so much more to come up, but really slowing myself down, really acknowledging what I've done, because I don't think I've ever stepped back and celebrated all the achievements I've made. It's always like on to the next thing, on to the next thing. That's not good enough. Need to keep going.
Yeah.
And yoga has really taught me to slow down, to be patient, and to be non-judgmental of myself, non-judgmental of my body, and getting a lot better at loving myself. Not always, but as much as I can be, or at least liking myself a lot of the time, rather than before when I really didn't like myself or my body. Gratitude for what my body does on a regular basis, like daily, what it's doing, every breath, every movement it does for me, which I completely took for granted before. And I'm now realizing that I've kind of gone full circle, and I am almost I've gone back to the health coaching, what I wanted to do in the first place, but I didn't know how to, and that is to really help people come up with the thing I've learned over the probably 5 or 6 years of going through this process is I've created my own set of tools. I've created this toolkit of ways to deal with stress, ways to deal with my anxiety and emotions and things like that. And what I'm doing now with my yoga teaching and also with my coaching is being able to help guide and support people to find their own tools. And I can share the tools I've learned, but also help them find the confidence to discover their own tools. And that does come from nutrition. It does come from exercise and movement. It comes from yoga. It comes from mindset work. It comes from being creative. And it's for the first time I feel like my little package that I offer is complete. I mean, it will constantly evolve, but I feel really happy in that I can actually help people come up with those tools themselves, and really grateful to the anxiety and the injuries and everything for bringing me to this point. So yeah, that's my kind of condensed, not really condensed story.
Well, I'm sure there's a whole lot more that you went through going through those years that you had gone through, right? But it's amazing how everything you have gone through has led you to where you are now. And it sounds like, I mean, not that you're perfect, and like you said, you're acknowledging that you're still evolving, but you're very happy with where you are now.
Yeah, and I think accepting that. What I remember being out on a walk last year, and suddenly this, like, I tend to walk a lot. I spend so much time in nature. Nature is like my meditation. Before I had the confidence to sit and meditate, walking and being outside was how I kind of got into it. And I remember walking across this field and having this like epiphany, which sounds so simple at the time, and I was suddenly like, oh my God, I'm never going to have this figured out.
Yeah.
And suddenly I was like, oh, okay, I don't have to be striving for this elusive moment where suddenly, ding, everything's going to be like, woo, perfect. Yeah. It's never going to happen. Yeah. So therefore, I might as well stop stressing about the fact that I need to get to this place, which doesn't exist. And yeah, it was like suddenly a lot sort of weight lifted, and I was like, oh, okay, I can just like enjoy right now then.
Yeah. It's tough when you're constantly putting that stress on yourself to be perfect or to figure things out, and then realizing if I don't have to figure things out and if I don't have to be perfect, there's so much more that you can do with it, right?
Exactly. I don't have to be constantly looking for what's next. I can actually just enjoy this moment. Yeah. But that's easier said than done.
Yeah, of course. Saying is always easier than the practice of doing. So how do you think the anxiety started in the first place, now that you think back to it?
I think I've always been a bit of a worrier, even as a child. Like, I can remember worrying about what people think of me a lot, and worrying about my health as well. So I think that the health, a lot of it was health anxiety, and being out of control. So feeling like I could control so many elements of my life, but actually if my body decided to do something, I didn't really have that much control, which is why the restrictive eating was a way of managing that, because I thought, well, if I don't eat certain things, then I'm going to reduce the chance of certain things happening.
And I'll be able to control as much as I can control going through this. Yeah.
Exactly. So to a point, the controlled eating was effective in managing my anxiety to a point, but it then created its own set of problems. So, you know, I think it's just something I had to go through to get to that point. And I feel like a lot of people do that and have to go through that slightly controlling phase before they can then come back to that balanced approach. And it's not necessarily the healthiest way of doing it, but I just think that is some people's nature.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, and even going through, a lot of women that I talk to, and myself included, is kind of like things have to go not too far, but one extreme, and then to realize that, and then you learn and change from that. But you would, without going to that level or without having that experience, you wouldn't recognize what you've actually been through and how to change, right?
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I definitely, go back to the first question about when the anxiety was triggered, I think going to secondary school was a huge, like, I loved school. I had a really good time, but I spent my whole time molding myself to be liked and to be enough and to be funny enough, pretty enough, you know, cool enough. Mm-hmm. And I constantly felt like I was having to strive to find, like, to be enough. And it kind of became ingrained in my head that I was not enough. Mm-hmm. And I would mold myself into different groups or different ways in a bid to finally find a bit of comfort or a bit of, like, feeling like I could just be myself, but it never happened. Mm-hmm. And I would say probably it's only been in the last 18 months or last couple of years when I've surrounded myself with some different people that finally I'm like, actually, they love me for who I am. I don't have to mold myself. I don't have to try and be funny or pretty or cool or, you know, be the popular one. I can just be me, and they love me for that. Mm-hmm. So that was a huge acceptance. And that, I think secondary school is probably a trigger for a lot of people. It's probably not called secondary school in where you are, but it's when you're sort of 11, you go to secondary school. And I went to secondary school without any friends. I was the only one from my school to go to that school. So it was quite a big deal, but I don't think people necessarily appreciate so much how much of a big deal it is at that age. You know, you go through, especially for a girl, you're probably at your most vulnerable time, and you have to be really strong and brave, and that can trigger all sorts of things.
Yeah, it's such a hard time in your life when you're changing so much as a person and in your own body, and to feel like you want to be worthy and to be enough is what you said. And I think at that age, it's so hard to learn to love yourself without any external influences. And I think that's something I know myself and a lot of women have struggled with.
Yeah. It's definitely a pattern that I don't know why we all have to go through it, but it seems like we do all have to go through it.
Yeah, I know. And I wish women were just born knowing that they were always enough and that they were worthy and they didn't need to be loved and liked and beautiful, and, you know, but for whatever reason, we always have to go through these stories and these changes. It's but you learn, and I believe that because of what you've been through, it can strengthen you and it changes you for the better, right? So.
Oh, 100%. I wouldn't change. I mean, as much as at the times when I was sitting on the floor rocking and wondering if I should check myself into some kind of rehab unit, as much as they were horrible, I would not change a single second of it, because it's taught me so much about myself, about other people, and I feel like I've always been a communicator. I've always been someone who is not afraid to say stuff. And at times, yes, I've kind of censored what I've said because for fear of what people would think. But right now, I don't actually care. And I just feel like I need to be the voice for all those people that haven't got the guts to do that. And that's okay that they're not brave enough to do that. They don't have to, but I can hopefully, I can spread my messages and share my experience, and it will just give them a little bit of like reassurance that they're not on their own. They don't have to be on their own. And they don't, I'm not saying everyone has to go and like write a blog and start spilling out their whole life story, but just by, when I was going through it, there was nothing that I'd find that resonated with me that made me feel less alone.
What would you say to someone going through what you had been through in terms of the anxiety and feeling like that stress and stuff?
I would say that it's not a weakness to ask for help. I felt like I felt like I couldn't ask for help, or if I did, it was kind of in a, I don't know, it would be in a slightly indirect way. So it might be through a personal trainer or something like that. It wasn't actually speaking to someone who had been through it. I would say that you are not alone, much as you feel like you're on your own at the moment, and it feels like nobody else could possibly ever understand what you're going through. You're not on your own, because so many of us have been through it. And there's, the more I speak to people, the more I realize how much this is like a hidden, I don't want to call it a disease, it's not a disease, a hidden mindset or emotion. I think people feel that it's something to be ashamed of, and it's not. And I think the other thing, that if at the time when you're in that state of pure panic, when you feel sick, when you can't breathe, when you feel like the world is ending and that all you want to do is actually just crawl in a ball and let it end, when you feel like that, it will pass. Like, just knowing that it will pass. It's not something that you're not going to have to deal with it forever. It will get better. And that can be really hard when people say to you, it's not, you're not going to feel like this all the time. At the time you're like, shut up, you don't know what I'm going through. But it genuinely will pass. And the other thing, I think, which I really, again, it's not an easy thing to suddenly just switch to this, but it's a choice. Like, we all have a choice. These are the anxiety, the panic attacks. Yes, they are real. It's not like they're not real, but actually we have a choice as to how we deal with these situations. And when we start to learn and understand what's going on in the body when we're under stress, and in this panicky state, when we start to understand that and really realize that actually this is our body surviving, this is our body going into fight or flight mode, this is what it like evolutionized to do. When we understand the symptoms, the physical symptoms, things like getting an upset stomach, or the shortness of breath, or the heart pumping, like when we understand that that's all actually natural, it's not us having some kind of it's not a health issue, then it can just give you a little bit more peace of mind. And each time you go through it and survive, you get stronger.
How do people who have been going through these things, what's not the best way, but what would you say in terms of overcoming or evolving from what they've gone through to help diminish, so they don't have these like panic attacks and everything so frequently? Is there anything that you would recommend?
I would recommend, the first thing I started with was with nutrition. So keeping my blood sugar balanced by being mindful of what I was eating. Now, I'm not saying going on a diet restricting foods, but I'm saying things like making sure you have some form of protein at every meal, because that will help your blood sugar levels. Trying to avoid things like caffeine and refined sugars, like a lot of sugar, even actually not just refined sugar, just sugar in general, natural sugars included. Just trying to not go too crazy with those, because they will upset the blood sugar levels and they will trigger maybe more anxiety. So nutrition is one thing. There's lots of little things. I always suggest just one tiny thing to start with. So if your nutrition is really good, then maybe think about adding in some kind of mindful exercise. Now, nothing that's too taxing on the body, like lovely long walks. Yoga, obviously, I'm an advocate of yoga. but not punishing yourself with like really hard sequences. Just things like gentle breath and movement techniques, just sinking, like even just as simple as inhale and hands come up, exhale, hands come down. Just as simple as that, just to start taking the mind away from that internal, like you get so fixated on what's going on inside, you forget to sync breath and you kind of lose connection with your body. So just breathing on an inhale with your, like moving one way and moving another way with an exhale can just start to calm yourself down. And breathing techniques, there are so many lovely pranayama techniques that you can introduce. Nobody even know. You could be in a supermarket, you could be in your car, you can tap into those at any time. Yeah. So those are like a few ways to find. But when I work with people, it's very much on an intuitive basis. So it's very much about what feels right for them, and I mean, I use my intuition, obviously, but it's trying to help them use their intuition to listen to the part of the body, you know, like where do you feel that anxiety? Where is the sensation? What is this? What symptom is coming up for you? You know, is it a bad tummy, or is it a chest pain, or is it tightness in your lower back? And then working with either breath or some form of movement to maybe, you know, like some breath into the base of, into the lower back, or maybe it could be just doing some kind of like heart opening poses or something like that, just to work with the area of the body that's feeling that tension or that anxiety.
How has your husband played a role in everything you've been through? Because it sounds like you were excited about 7 years, but I mean, you've been through so much within the time that you're together. What was that like?
We've been through some tough times.
Yeah.
He's supported me a huge amount. Like he's my best friend, and I love him to pieces. But there have been times where I thought maybe I should be on my own, or he would be better off without me, without all my crap going on. And there are times when he's admitted to me that he doesn't always know how to deal with stuff. He's not an anxious person, probably just as well, because I think the two of us combined.
He's a
he's quite laid back. He doesn't understand what it feels like. He's never had a panic attack. He's never had anxiety. So at times it was really hard for me, because I was like, you don't understand how I feel. Like, you can't possibly understand. When he'd be like, oh, you know, just chill out, or just, you know, just breathe through it. And I'd be like, yeah. So there are times where it's been really hard. And I think a big turning point in our relationship was me going away for my teacher training. Both of us had learned to appreciate each other a lot. I realised like a lot of our issues have stemmed from my self-loathing. So therefore, by me doing work on myself and being in a better place and feeling more happy and confident in my body and in my mind and in my job and in my life in general, then that has only helped our relationship. He's been a rock. You know, he has been a rock. He's always supported me in terms of emotional support, and I'm very grateful for that. And a lot of guys would probably not stuck around, not at the point of like constant phone calls like, oh, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Did you tell a lot of people when you were going through all of this, or did you kind of keep it quiet? Or
I think when the early few years, I had a group of friends who actually 2 or 3 of them out of that group have also struggled with panic attacks. So that was really helpful to me, to have a few friends that I knew had gone through it. So I would have like a wobble and I'd be on WhatsApp to them and they'd like help calm me down. I can remember one time being like driving down the motorway on the way back from a meeting. I hadn't eaten properly, I was tired, all of the things that I know trigger off my anxiety. I was stuck in the car and I was like, oh my God, I feel sick. What happens if I'm sick? What's wrong with me? Something's wrong with me. And I was on the phone to my husband and he was like, freaking out at the end of the phone. I was like, you are not helping me right now. I had to just hang up the phone, and I called my friend, and she like literally kind of talked me my way out of it. And it was amazing to have that option, to have someone to talk to, which is why I think as a coach, I always would offer, I would want to be that person for someone, because it's really lonely. And I'd be sitting there going, who can I talk to? Who can I phone? Like, no one's going to understand this. But then a couple of people did, which was really nice. So having that support network is really, really important. But I didn't tell many people about it until I really had a bit more of a handle on it myself. And then I started blogging. So I started blogging about nearly 2 years ago now, and started kind of like not giving away the whole story, but just bit by bit. And now I honestly, like, I would tell a stranger on the street. I have no reservations about that. There are still things that are parts of my life that I don't share, obviously, and there's stuff I'm working through at the moment that I'm not like ready to broadcast across the internet. But I feel that I'm not ashamed in one tiny bit to have suffered from anxiety, or to have panic attacks, or to be stressed, or to have burnt out. I'm not ashamed of that in any shape or form. And I hope that by sharing that, I can help other people feel less ashamed and less like they've done something wrong, or that whole why me? Why is this happening to me? Well, now I'm so grateful that it's happened to me.
Yeah, it's funny how it changes.
Yeah.
How have you gotten to the point now that you're comfortable saying this to other people? Like, how have you got to this point? It's not easy.
It's not easy. I think it just feels like I need to. Probably the most daunting thing is actually letting like people that are really close to me know about stuff that they didn't even have a clue about when because I hid it so well. So that was a big step for me, when I probably published one of my first blogs about it, and even like my parents didn't really know the extent of it. The only person that really, really knew was my husband. And yeah, that was quite daunting at first, but then the response I got from people was quite amazing, and realizing that by me sharing that story, how much I'd helped other people was just, I was like, I just need to do this. I need to share it. So for me, it's never been an option not to share. It's just, it feels like I have to. That's why it's happened to me.
What are you most grateful for today, or grateful about today?
Oh my God. Well, everything. Like, I look out the window at my office and I see green trees and flowers and my house, and I couldn't just say one thing. I am grateful for every amazing thing, but actually probably more grateful for the really tough things that have happened. That's that's probably it. My anxiety is one of the biggest things I'm grateful, because without it, I wouldn't have discovered nutrition, I wouldn't have discovered the gym, I wouldn't have injured myself, I wouldn't have then discovered yoga, I wouldn't have met the people I've met, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. None of this would have happened without it. So as I said earlier, I wouldn't change a single bit of it.
Yeah. And it sounds like because of what you've been through now, for kind of like the first time ever in your life, you love yourself and you're comfortable with yourself. And it sounds like if you didn't necessarily go through that bad stuff, you have still been going through it now. If you didn't.
Yeah. I'm definitely not, I can't say that I like adore myself 100% of the time. I think I'd be surprised to find anybody that really can truthfully say that they love themselves every single second of every single day, because there's always times where you're like, oh, but, maybe I could lose a kilo or whatever, I don't know. But yeah, I definitely am still working on that, but I am so much more accepting of it. And I wrote an article not that long ago about starting with self-like, because I feel like self-love is a big ask. To go from loathing yourself and looking at yourself and having just hatred and not being able to see anything positive, to suddenly being like, oh, I love myself. That's not, it's very rare that would like just suddenly happen. So actually it's learning to like the parts of you that you don't like, and then eventually, slowly, gradually, before you know it, you'll be like, oh, like actually, I'm starting to love this part of me. And it's little bit, you can't just love everything.
No.
It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and you can't go from hate to love either. Some people, or I thought of it, and I've heard it different ways, is going even from hate to neutral. Like, it's even
exactly
like right away. So even just acknowledge your body as a body on its own without an attribute of good or bad, and then it's the gradual process, right?
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you start to shift your perspective onto not what your body looks like, but what it does for you. Like, what does it do on every daily basis? And when you get really down to it, okay, there might be things that, my digestion is still not great, and it probably never will be perfect. There are still like niggles. I have like sinus issues, little things like that. It's not going to be perfect, but actually just learning to appreciate all the amazing things it does do, like be able to practice yoga. I mean, I feel so lucky that I am flexible enough and I can practice yoga. Okay, I still can't do headstands unassisted because they terrify the life out of me. I'm not super bendy. I've not got a really bendy back, so I can't do all the really pretty Instagram back bends. But actually I can do a lot of other things, and even when your body isn't doing what you would like it to do, it's still breathing for you, it's still there, and it's still working its little backside off every second day to keep you alive. So actually there's always something to be grateful for that point.
What's your definition, and you touched upon it, but what's your definition of perfectly imperfect?
Perfectly imperfect. I think it's the word content comes to mind. I think it's just being content with where you're at on that very day, and learning that each day you feel differently. And this is something definitely that yoga has taught me, and in my practice and in when I'm teaching, it's about meeting your body where it's at that day, that second, that moment. So I think it's accepting that things aren't going to be perfect, and actually what is perfect, who defines what perfect is? Is perfect having like the body that looks like a magazine model? I mean, I don't even know what perfect is. So I think it's just acceptance and being content with things right now.
I love that. What's your definition of powerfully passionate?
Powerfully passionate. Oh, I think it's anything that drives you, like that you can't wait to do in the morning, and you kind of get excited the night before, sometimes can't even sleep. Powerfully passionate, just putting your heart and soul into something and feeling fulfilled, I think. And it doesn't have to be your job. It could be a hobby, or it could be spending time with certain people. I think, it's putting your heart and soul into something, I think.
What's next for you? Because I know now you've kind of found what you really like to do. What do you plan to do next?
What's next? Oh, that's that question, isn't it? Like, I don't really know where I'm learning very much to be kind of open to the flow of life a bit more, and trying not to, for the first time in my life, have points where I need to get to. I would like to really develop my mind and body guidance coaching, which is to help people with stress and anxiety create their own toolkits. I would like to establish some really amazing yoga retreats that incorporate nature and yoga and food, because those three things are what I love. I have lots of ideas. I think the biggest thing is that I just want to keep enjoying every day, and slowing down.
Life
is something very new to me. Taking less action, although I've always been that kind of person that's like, if you want something, you make it happen, you have to take action, you have to do stuff. Now I'm actually learning that the less I do, the more action I'm taking, in a weird kind of way.
And in a backwards kind of way. And I'm guilty of not doing that. So you saying that is something I definitely need to work on myself.
I'm not saying I've got it in the bag by any stretch of the imagination.
Just being aware of that, right? Being
aware of it and allowing myself to just sit. That's a new concept to me.
Yeah, wow.
Without being on my phone, or without watching something or listening to something, or trying to use that time to be productive, even if it's 5 minutes, just sitting. And it's quite uncomfortable at first, but I think it's quite rewarding.
Nice. I guess I kind of have 2 questions for you to finish off. First of all, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, or where do you hang out often online, or?
Okay, so my website is laurensarahyoga.com. So that's Sarah with an H. And I am mostly, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My Facebook is Lauren Barber. It's all linked from my website. And then my Instagram is Lauren S. Barber.
Cool.
I don't tend to hang around on Twitter very much. I've tried. I'm not really a Twitter kind of person.
Me neither.
But I'm always open to emails, so I love connecting with people that way. And that's probably the best way. Just visit my website and you can find all the links and contact details from there. And I do blog pretty much at least once a week, so there's always some kind of content going out there.
Nice. Yeah. And I'll have all the links and everything on the blog for people to find you and underneath the video. So it's perfect. I want to thank you before I ask the last question. Everything you've been through is definitely been hard, but just the way it's transformed who you are now is so powerful. And the fact that everything you said about being open and sharing, and how if you can help just one person know that they're not alone in their struggles, and by helping them through this, and how you've connected with the mind and nature and food and your physical being in that way is so powerful. And I want women of all ages to hear that. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It really means a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, well, that's the easy part. So the last question I kind of wanted to finish off with is, what's one piece of advice or kind of a message as a takeaway for Earth Girls, or someone struggling or struggled through something and feels alone and afraid of opening up? Is there anything that you wanted to finish off with, your parting pieces of wisdom here? Yeah, no pressure. Yeah.
Oh gosh. I think one of my favorite quotes is, and I have it above my desk, always believe that something wonderful is about to happen.
I love that one.
And I think that kind of, even when you're feeling really low and stuff is going on, there's always the possibility that something wonderful is about to happen. And if you can just find your toolkit, find your little ways, however they may be, whether it's breath, nutrition, meditation, movement, talking to someone, if you can just keep going, just don't give up, don't feel like it's beaten you, don't ask yourself why it's happening to you, just keep going and just believe that there is something amazing just around the corner, and most of the time there is.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, and I think one thing I think I've always believed in, and that is that you know, some people may argue this, but I genuinely do believe that anything is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as long as you're believing in that, then you can get through anything.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, thank you. That is a beautiful, I'm not even going to say anything after that, way of finishing off. So thank you so much, Lauren. And I'm excited to share this out with everyone, and I'm sure they'll really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for checking out this video. If you liked it, be sure to actually like below and subscribe for more. And let us know what you thought on Instagram. These stories are here to empower you to unearth yourself so you live powerfully passionate. So you embrace your imperfections and find purpose in your story. You are not alone. And together we can turn our struggles into our strengths. Until next time, 2 weeks. The world needs women who have come alive. Unearth yourself. The sky is the limit, Earth girls.